This is a skeletal practical review, the vertebrae. Now, looking at this vertebrae, it's going to have a very specific structure that's only found in this type of a vertebrae. If we look here, these are transverse processes, right? They're processes that stick out transversely, and there's a hole going through that transverse process. And if you remember, the only vertebrae that has a hole through the transverse process, which we call the transverse foramen, is going to be cervical vertebrae. So, and this is very unique cervical vertebrae. As you can tell, it's more of a ring. And so this is actually C1, or the atlas. So some of the structures you want to know on the atlas are the superior articular facets, the transverse processes, the transverse foramen, the anterior vertebral arch, and the posterior vertebral arch. This is going to be C2. Again, you see the transverse process. Here's a hole going through the transverse process. So this is the transverse foramen. Other structures that we see here, we have the superior articular facets. This nubby thing here and here are the dens. We have pedicles. Right here we have the lamina. And then we have the spinous process, as well as the vertebral foramen. And I might not have mentioned that on this one too. Here's the vertebral foramen. And here we have the typical cervical vertebrae, and we have the body, we have the transverse process, we have the transverse foramen, the pedicle, the vertebral foramen, and these are the superior articular processes. It's the lamina and the spinous process. In this case, the spinous process is bifid, which means it's forked. This is going to be kind of the mid-thoracic region. So this is the thoracic vertebrae. Here we see the body, here and here. We have the transverse processes. Here is the spinous process, pretty long spinous process. Here's the lamina. Right here, some of the lamina. Here's the superior articular process. Here's the superior articular process. This right here is the superior articular facet. The vertebral foramen. And the pedicles. And you can see the pedicles here. Here's the inferior vertebral notch, the superior vertebral notch, and then we have our costal facets. So here's a costal facet, here's a partial facet, so this is a costal demifacet. And this is the lumbar vertebrae. And here we can see the body. You can see a little bit of the body here. Going down in through here would be the vertebral foramen. We can see the squared off spinous process. And here's the spinous process. Here's where the pedicle would be. Here's transverse process, superior articular process, here and here, and here. Here's the inferior articular process, here and here. Here's the inferior articular process with the inferior articular facet. And that takes care of the vertebrae.